Unleashing Inner Goldilocks, how to get it just right. Thank you so much for joining us for another exciting and insightful hour. And cannot wait for you to meet our guest today and dig into another meaningful topic that is relevant to us. As we get started, let us take a moment and think about why. Why are we talking about Goldilocks and why are we talking about unleashing our inner Goldilocks? As a Goldilocks community, it's important for us to keep that front and center. To me, Goldilocks symbolizes balance. At a very young age, just like each of us, we all knew exactly how to influence individuals, whether it's our family, our neighbors, strangers, and to get exactly what we want done. The power of influence comes from understanding the other person and knowing how to get them wrapped around our little finger as a little child. We got things done. Even before we started talking, we had the power of influencing adults. So where along the way did we lose that? Where did our conditioning come? Where we didn't listen with all our senses to see what's going on and how to influence others. Somehow we got stuck in feeling like we know what we know, and that's the position we're taking, and we're not changing our minds. Why does that become a problem for us? When we come from a place of centeredness, when we come from a place where Goldilocks knows exactly how hot or how cool her porridge should be, how hard or how soft any surface she's going to sit or sleep on needs to be. She knew that perfect centeredness that's going to work for her, right? There was a time we knew that too. What has caused us to forget that and move away from that centeredness to where we have staked our positions? Research shows that we can each influence only three levels from where we are. Think about that. If I am at the extreme right end of an issue, because that is what I subscribe to, since I'm already at the extreme, I can only influence three levels towards the center being the operative word. If I'm already at the extreme left end of an issue, I still can only influence three levels towards the center since I'm already at the extreme left end. But what if I am able to see the different perspectives, and not just my perspective and somebody else's perspective, also the third party's perspective, right? So see various perspectives and come from that informed centeredness. Now, all of a sudden, I can influence, because I'm already at the center, I can influence three levels to my right, three levels to my left, and everybody else in my center lane. I have taken my three layers of influence and geometrically improved it to have 7 degrees of influence because I am mindfully coming from that place of centeredness. Imagine the power of that impact. Imagine the power it gives me in influencing my purpose and getting everybody rallied around that public good and that shared prosperity, because there is more than just me in this journey. And if I can meet each other's perspectives and each other's benefits halfway, we all win. And when we all win, I thrive, you thrive, collectively we thrive. And that's part of what's important in unleashing our inner Goldilocks. Finding that centeredness is key. It's key to having business success. It's key to serving the public good. It is key to have a harmonious life in a society. What is your purpose? It's your purpose that drives you, right? Have you ever sat down and thought about how your purpose itself sits in the centeredness? Your purpose sits in the centeredness of what you love, what you're great at, and what the world needs. If you love something and you're not great at it, somebody else is going to do it better, and therefore success is going to go to them. If you love it and you're great at it, but the world doesn't need it, you can't drive your economic engine through it. Therefore, it is not going to deliver financial outcome for you. If you're great at it and the world needs it, but you don't love it, it's going to be very, very visible. Your heart is not in it. And over time, you're going to get frustrated, and people who are being served by you are going to get frustrated. So understanding that your purpose itself sits in that sweet spot of where these three elements intersect, what you love, what you're great at, what the world needs, that's the start of finding centeredness for your own fulfilling life. Because your career is not just a job. It has to be something that sits in the sweet spot of your purpose. Therefore, you're going to enjoy doing it for the rest of your adult life till you retire. As we go into today's episode, I want you to keep three things in perspective. Today, we're going to be talking about public safety and our shared humanity and the importance of showing up in a responsible way. It's very important for us to keep our shared humanity in focus. We are human, that's given, but how we show up with our humanity is what's going to separate us from everybody else. Social responsibility starts with putting our shared humanity first. If I don't recognize the existence of humanity around me, and I start parsing and saying only certain types of people deserve my humanity and the rest don't, then I'm never going to show up with social responsibility, because I am not recognizing everybody in my community as part of that human race. And my inability to recognize that, because I'm not coming from that place of centeredness, and because I'm coming from one of those extreme positions, I am not going to be able to influence and drive the kind of positive social change I strive to drive. The second nugget of wisdom I want you to keep in mind is safety and security are basic needs. You hear me say basic needs. I didn't say basic human needs. Every living creature wants to feel safe. Every living creature wants to feel secure. It's not just human, right? So safety and security are basic human needs. Providing them with mindful leadership builds resilient communities. When we give all communities in this globe a sense of safety and security, we are truly creating an inclusive global community where everybody can show up and live their purpose. What happens when people don't get to feel safe and secure? We reduce them to survival mode. That means in a survival mode, it is dog eat dog, it's social Darwinism, and therefore humanity takes a second seat because survival trumps showing up in our humanity. It's very, very important for us to remember the entire world needs to feel safe and secure. Think about COVID, what we're dealing with today. Until the whole world is safe, we're not going to be rid of COVID, right? It's not about the affluent countries. It's not about the countries who have the money and the funding and the resources to provide care. It's everybody. We're only safe as the most vulnerable of us in the world. And the third nugget I want you to keep in mind is the importance of investing in building integrity and trust. Success of leading in crisis is rooted in the investment of integrity, trust, and resilience made along the way. Before we show up to lead, we should have already invested in integrity to build trust and build not just our resiliency, but the resiliency of the community around us, so that we truly can lead in crisis. During crisis is not the time to tell people, trust me. No, by then the damage is already done if we haven't built this trust. Today's episode is public safety and social responsibility. And it is truly my honor and pleasure to have Chief Mike Spade here with us today. Mike, welcome to the episode.
Thank you, Cass. I'm extremely happy and excited to be one of your guests today and to learn from you, as hopefully everyone else can learn a little bit from me.
Oh, they are going to learn so much from you, and I am going to be learning from you. And this is going to be a super, super exciting conversation. So, Chief Spain has been the fire chief for Bentonville Fire Protection District, and he's going to explain to you very shortly what's the difference between fire protection and any other type of a fire department. And he's been a trainer, a mentor, and leader in the field of public safety with many, many accomplishments under his belt. If I start listing it, we'll be here for a whole week. Just for full disclosure purposes, I first met Chief Spade in my classroom as he was taking the public safety administration and homeland security management program. And we have gone from a professor student to becoming friends, and I would happily say kind of extended family and very close family friends. And I cannot tell you enough about the pride I have in watching him serve the community with such kindness and compassion, at the same time with a sense of responsibility and knowing what is right and always wanting to do the right thing. He has served the profession as an EMS and fire service since 1974 and has been a fire chief for 23 years in two different organizations. So he comes to us with a wealth of knowledge. And before we even get started, Mike, I want you to introduce your buddy right there, because I couldn't have an episode without the most important mascot of the fire department.
Oh, that's Rubble. And actually, he's looking at me right now. My wife and I have gotten to know Rubble because we adopt rescue bulldogs. He is a phenomenal buddy. He's with me as much as I can, but Rubble cares. And I think really he gives more to us than we give to him. But, as you were talking today, it's all about social community. It's all about responsibility. Mm-hmm. With that being said, we also have to have our outs, our time to ourselves. Mm-hmm. And Rubble is the one that does that. When I get home from work, he's all excited. When I go to work, he's kind of, I want to say melancholy, like, well, gosh, can't I come? Because before I retired from Bensonville, he would come to work with me all the time.
Absolutely. I remember seeing him in the fire department because we had classes in your firehouse.
Yes, we did. Mm-hmm. Yes, we did.
So I'm curious, can you share with the community what got you started? You started in EMS and moved on, and you went on to become a fire chief. You took a slightly different route, right? Most people tend to start in firefighting.
Correct. Actually, I was a little bit ahead of my time. The reason I got into EMS was frankly due to my mother. She was a nurse, and I'd always been brought up to act and to feel that you help people with no matter what. So before I got out of high school, I took an EMT class. I loved it. Then from there, at that time, the structure of fire and EMS is not what it is today. I think we can look back at our roots, showing how far emergency medical services has come due to the Vietnam War. Many of the paramedics, or I should say they were medics back then, came post-Vietnam. Many of my instructors were post-Vietnam. And it was proven that by immediate care on scene with a high level of expertise, and virtually the coin of the phrase is, we are the physician in your living room, brought out phenomenal results. Difference from the Korean War. In the Korean War, you would, and World War II, if you were wounded, whether it be mortally wounded or needed minimally wounded, the survival rate was roughly less than 10%. They proved in the Vietnam War with the advent of medics that in fact they flipped it. They flipped it from 10% survival to actually 91% survival. And what it was the quick action of the medics in the field or the corpsmen working with the surgeons who were at another location. And then post that, everyone in the fire and EMS had to look back to what's called Emergency. It was a show out of LA County. It showed how paramedics worked. Until then, we were known as ambulance drivers. We would get there quickly, do minimal care, and rush them to the hospital. Well, the advent of that with research proved that it just didn't work. So my driving force was, first of all, to serve the community, and I'm still serving the community. And it's not about financial reward; it's about personal reward. Since then, the advent has been. It used to be in many communities around the United States and even Europe. The third service. By that, you have police department, you have fire department, you have EMS services. Found out that given the location of fire departments, given the fact that back then there were a lot of fires, fortunately now they have decreased, but given the location of where the firehouses were at, and Cass, this is before you were born, the way that they would define where a firehouse was how far the horses could run without running out of energy. Typically, a firehouse back then was anywhere from a mile to a mile and a half apart. That meant location, location, location. You can get people of higher level of expertise there quicker. As soon as you can get people there that know what they're doing, that's the number one, the better result. But it wasn't what was needed. So we had to engage the public. In Seattle, Washington, they started out of Seattle Fire Department, what's called the CPR for Life. They proved that getting the public engaged with the fire department and with the police department, given that prior to arriving at the hospital, they went from your survival rate from a cardiac arrest or a trauma was less than 1%. They've proven in Seattle and they've proven around the world using their strategic model that you can have a survival rate of up to 60%. And that's a viable. When I say viable, that means that they're coming out of the hospital, they're able to live a reasonably productive life. And that's really what this is all about. But
and I'm glad you gave that stat and the history, Chief, because I'm sitting here thinking about our personal experience over the last 4 or 5 years. And the fact that I was trained by my students, the fire departments, to be able to give CPR, right? I was trained the American Heart Association. And because of my ability to give my husband CPR is the reason why he survived. And he survived in a way that he was fully functional when he got out of the hospital because his electrolytes completely dropped and his heart stopped. And I was able to get him to breathe and turn him on the side and wait for the paramedics to come. And then they had to restart his heart twice to get him back up and running. And, you know, I know from my personal experience how important that is and why it's important for the community to get involved and people in every community being CPR certified, knowing how to give CPR to a male, a female, a child. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because that education is so important for life-affirming decisions.
Well, first of all, to hear the story that you just told me about Mike is heartwarming. But you've proven by your example that the combination of the community, which is you, the first responders, which are police and fire, and the hospital, that you have an excellent outcome. I think as we look at this, and I can give an example, is I was walking rubble, and one night, and all of a sudden, this lady across the street said, "Can we talk to you?" So I said, "Sure." She came over, and she said, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I said, "Honestly, I don't." Well, she said, "You saved my life 40 years ago when I was in Iowa City, Iowa. It was a tragic situation, and fortunately, she was alive. I delivered her daughter, actually. It was in a pouring rain, and how she had remembered me is not by my face. Obviously, I've got gray hair now, but by my voice. And it's situations like that that are heartwarming to hear, that people are living a productive life, living to their fullest. But to go back to what you talked about with social humanity and responsibility, the basic foundation needs to be trust. When you went through CAS and you were our instructor, you were new to fire and EMS. I think just as much as you taught us about social humanity, about the need to be engaged with our community, I think we were able to impart a little bit to you.
Absolutely.
Now, when we look at it, some of the histories is in the communities right now, and let's talk about COVID. Let's talk about what's happening. There's a lot of misinformation. We need to turn the tide from a negative to a positive. So how do we do that? First of all, we have to build trust. You don't have trust in your community if you don't have trust in your first responders. If you don't have trust in the physicians, you have nothing. How do we do that? By action. We have to provide results. We have to show what the value for what we do is. How do we do that? Is showing people what we do, showing people what our training is about, showing people the cost, and then we're going to get into funding a little bit, but showing what their value, that they're relying on us to provide them. Way back when, I wasn't around then, when Ben Franklin started the first fire service in Philadelphia. It was called the Union Fire Department. It was out of a need. It was a need where people were losing their homes, losing everything they had to fire. It was out of necessity. And so we were developed as an insurance policy that whatever catastrophic situation you're experiencing, whatever catastrophic event in your life, whether it be social, whether it be medical, whether it be personal, first responders had to be adequately trained and understanding what their community is about. And so we're an insurance policy that when you call, whether it's 911 or whether it's a 7-digit number, that we're there expeditiously within 4 to 6 minutes, and we know what to do. We're kind of a jack of all trades is what it comes down to, because no call is the same. But unfortunately, the cost as we have to look at funding. We have to look at how do we get this done. I can tell you when I started in a Cadillac ambulance that cost $1,000. Right now, the basic ambulance costs $330,000. You have equipment of up to $150,000 to $200,000. That's before they even turn a wheel. And an ambulance right now is going to roughly, if you're lucky, last about 4 to 5 years in a front line. So to kind of give you a perspective, when you're driving your car and you have 10 miles on your car, that's the equivalent of an ambulance of having 50 miles, because you're going from a dormant situation to a critical situation. Now you look at fire trucks. When I started our first fire truck, I think the founding fathers had some concerns. It was $50,000.
Hmm.
Right now, a basic fire engine, I say basic, that means no bells or whistles, you're talking $600,000 to $700,000. For a ladder truck to be able to reach high levels, such as we had a tower and we had what's called a stick, which is just a ladder. That's roughly right now 1.3 to $1.4 million. And when you look at that, let's bring it kind of in perspective. When you go in to get your oil change in your car, they do everything. It maybe cost you, I'm going to say $75, $80. To change the oil in a fire engine is $4,000.
Wow.
The average with a fire engine, you have 10 wheels. We get, if we're lucky, 10,000 miles out of each wheel, or with the tire. And with that being said, a new tire is about $2,000 to $2,500. So the cost has escalated. Now, we're needing to provide trust, which is action. We're needing to provide value. Now we get into the whole thing is training.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to get people engaged from the community to the physician. So, and we talk about it, it's not about how much money you make. It's about how you deliver what you've been taught. I had a critical situation years ago, and a captain helped me out with this. I had 9 SIDS crib deaths in 1 year.
Wow.
I was devastated. And for people that don't know, that's children under 1 who pass away of unknown origin. He said, Mike, you need to think of, we see so many traumatic situations. We see so many life-altering situations that are the negative. He said to me, think of go in on one thing that's a positive and hold on to that. I can safely say Captain Smith helped me tremendously because I've delivered 28 babies in the field. So what was that due to? It was due to someone entrusting us.
Mm-hmm.
So now, not only in the United States, but across the world, we need funding. But let's go back to training. We need to train fire chiefs. We need to train union members. We need to be transparent and say, this is the money. This
Mm-hmm.
is how we do it. Unfortunately, many of my colleagues will say, oh, it's not my problem. The community will pay for it. Well, the reality is the community will not. We need to look at
Community may not even have the sufficient funding, right? Because some
correct.
communities don't have, they may have a used fire engine and a used ambulance, but they don't have enough money to man it. So they borrow. Multiple towns come into an emergency situation.
Exactly. And that's an excellent segue. We cannot do it all ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And to speak for the city of Chicago, which is working next to the city of Chicago for many years, is Chicago, New York, LA can't do it on their own. So, and a community cannot support it individually. So what we have in Illinois with Spread, and I must give kudos to retired Lieutenant Colonel Reardon. He was Air Force retired. He put together what's called a mutual aid box alarm system, which is called MABUS. That means that at any moment and any time, not only will your community respond, but other communities respond. And our goal is to put in 16 minutes, at least put 20 to 25 personnel on the scene, trained together. So what that means is we have to train together, because one fire department is not the same as another fire department. So we train together. That's how we it's not reduce funding, but we minimize our increases. as far
So
as what the
you
costs are.
you share the pool and you collaborate
Mhm.
in the interest of the public good. And the people need to look at your service in terms of how much value they place on a life, right? And
Exactly.
and one of the biggest disappointments for me living in communities that keep voting to shut down fire departments is until their family is affected, they
Mhm.
don't give much value to a life. But then when
Mhm.
it's their family, they get very upset. A situation comes to my mind. There was a Texas based individual who was leading the efforts of not paying taxes for that community. They actually passed a vote saying you pay into a pool as membership if you want fire protection and EMS. And he
Mhm.
led the charge for not paying into it. And when his house caught on fire, the fire department came and waited because his neighbor had paid into the pool. And then when the neighbor's house started getting burnt, then the fire department went and put that fire out. But this guy who said, I don't need the fire department, I won't pay for it. When his house got burnt, he actually sued the fire department and won, didn't he?
Mhm. 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 So, excellent segue is my son used to be a SWAT officer in Austin, Texas. Uh, they went through the tumultuous situation 2 years ago. They defunded the police by $150 million. And due to the safety issues that my son dealt with, and he loved being a police officer, he left the force, as many other people did, just because their safety was compromised. And if you're not safe, you can't provide that to someone else.
You can't give what you don't have.
Exactly, exactly. So this is where it's coming with the fire service is people look and an interesting statistic in your lifetime, in our lifetime, hope the national average is you will use the fire department or EMS 7% of the population. But with that, unfortunately, we're all maturing. We have the baby boomers.
Mhm.
Fires are going down, but EMS calls are going up at a rate of anywhere from 4 to 7% a year. What does
And
that
it has
mean?
been really worse with the pandemic.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And this is what it's a social situation that we're dealing with.
Mhm.
And fortunately, in the Chicago area, we're very blessed. But I've also been in other areas, as you brought up, Cass, that they have volunteers. I don't know if
Mhm.
people realize this, but in the United States, over 85% of the fire departments are volunteer or some paid on call. What that means is you respond to a call and you maybe get $5 or $10. That's a lot of the fire departments. Now,
So you're putting your life on the line and running into a place everybody is running out of, and you get paid barely anything for that
ex
sacrifice, right?
exactly. When I started, I can tell you in 1974, I started 97 cents an hour. And
Wow.
fortunately, it's moved up from there. But the unfortunate reality is that um, cost to do business has increased, but people can't pay for it. So how do we do it?
Mhm.
A little help from each other. Now, I will tell you, I've sent ambulances, older fire engines to South America.
Mhm.
They will take our older vehicles. They would take and this is brand new to them. This is god awful fantastic because they don't have the funding. They don't have the manpower. So in my time of being in the fire service, we've had to look at alternative funding because you can't go to the residents constantly with the idea of pay, pay, pay. So what do? We look at, as I said, mutual aid because everyone cannot do it themselves. Number two, we look at state and local grant funding. Since 9/11, which we all agree was the most catastrophic situation happened in the United States. But I think we all know if we go across the world, what happened on 9/11 is their norm. They have to deal with terrorist events. They have to deal with catastrophe.
Yeah, I grew up that way. And where I grew up in Sri Lanka, we didn't have the kind of public safety, each one to our own. We actually had to stitch up our own neighbors because it was not even a luxury. It was literally non-existent.
Right, exactly. So what that comes down to is the grants, and since 9/11, grants have helped us tremendously, but they're not always going to be there. So to me, what kind of some of the keys is developing a private public sector, foundations, presenting what we need, how we need it, but there needs to be a checks and balances. We need to prove what our value is financially on the books, that when we put together our pro forma, from our pro forma, then we put together our business plan, and then we put together a strategic plan. So as you talk about the 3-step process, that's what it comes down to. And then we look at it, not so much on a daily basis, but we revisit it and prove the value. But we need the private, we need the public, we need everyone to understand and orchestrate what needs to be done. So
a question comes to my mind as I've continued to teach this profession for 22 years, and everything I know about public safety and homeland security, I have learned from my military and my public safety students, right? I came in knowing the statistics and the finance and the leadership, but I didn't know your profession. So for 22 years, I am learning and I continue to learn. And what I am seeing from other countries and other countries' experimentation with figuring out what the cost structure would be and what to do to navigate this, they're bringing in artificial intelligence and robotics alongside personnel, so that they're not putting people into the fire, they're sending robots, and therefore reducing the cost of insurance and reducing the personnel cost. Because to insure the life and the accidental death and dismemberment of a firefighter is enormous, because it's a high-risk profession, right? So what do you think of some of these developments that are happening where machines are helping defray some of the cost and increasing the safety of the public safety professionals themselves? And it also is then changing the way public safety need to be trained now. It's not all physical, it's intellectual, it's technological, it's technical.
Oh, excellent segue. And it goes into training. When I started, a lot of people didn't have any formal education other than high school. Now you work up that you have to have associate's degree, you have to have and a bachelor's degrees. At my level, I've got my master's degree, as you know, but there are now some communities that are asking for PhDs for the leadership. And you're right, you need to use your intellect, not your brawn. And we're learning from Europe. This is a sad commentary. In the United States, roughly about 100 plus firefighters die every year. That's 1 every 3 days, which is unacceptable. In Europe, in the UK, they don't have deaths, because they've come to the realization, let's use our intelligence. Let's put what's a cost value analysis together and decide what really is important. And you say human life is important. One of the best technologies that we're using right now is drones. Drones can go into catastrophic situations for us. They can see what's going on. We use the military drones, to be very candid with you, to go into high risk, hazardous material situations. We have no business being in to do what's called recon. Now, to your point with the robots, as you know, Bensonville was diminished by 15% when they expanded O'Hare Airport. Well, there was a lot of research done with UL, and they set up fires, and they used robots to go in, to your point, and they found out that a strategically placed robot that's controlled outside can actually do a considerable amount of restoration. And when I say restoration, avoiding further damage. So I'm all for it, because to give a life for property, no. You know, our sole goal is not property, it's life. Life, then property. And when I started, Cass, when someone retired, they actually would live 2 to 3 months afterwards, and they would die because of what they were involved in. The toxins that are given off, because everything's plastic, and that's a petroleum base. We need to be smarter. We, you know, the idea of risking our lives. No, no. I've been to too many funerals. Been to too many funerals over my time, and it just isn't worth it.
I love all of this information we're getting from you, Chief. And I really want to open it up to the audience. We have another 15 minutes left. I want them to jump in, ask any questions from you, share their thoughts, so that we really keep this engaging. Anybody thinking of what your thoughts are going through your head and what questions you have? Go ahead, Robin.
Oh, take my little cover off. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Oh my gosh, it was really amazing hearing what you had to say. The two things that are stunning me are how much the equipment costs, and even maintaining the equipment, how much that costs, and therefore the genuine need for funding. And the second thing I'm blown away in a horrific way is how many firefighters die every year. I'm just stunned at that. And so once again, you know, doing whatever needs to be done to protect those lives of the firefighters is really crucial. The thought that came to me early in the discussion was, I don't know if you want to call it the fear factor, but how do you, I mean, I assume that you are scared some of the time, that there's something really fearful and challenging. And, you know, bravery isn't the absence of fear, it's, you know, having courage in the face of fear. So I'm wondering, how do you deal with the mental aspects of firefighting, and how do you go about training or expanding people's capacity to function effectively in the face of these just really scary situations that most of us have run away from?
Well, it's kind of an oxymoron to when everyone's running away, we run in. I get that. But I'm going to go back a little bit. You talk about with vehicles. Per vehicle, it costs me roughly $40,000 per vehicle to keep it on the road every year. Per vehicle, mind you. Secondly, you brought up as far as fear. We have to have fear. It is a fearful situation. And one thing that's coming, you have to look at down deep, why are you here? We're here to serve. We're public service. And I've come to terms over the years, my 47 years, is that, and I'm still engaged and want to give more, is PTSD. I do suffer from PTSD from what I've seen. We need help just as much as some of the other people. Unfortunately, when I started, many of the people that I worked with were alcoholics because of what they had to do. Now that has brought up, and the feeling back then is you never brought it up. You kept it inside. Well, now, fortunately, probably about the last 10 years, it's brought out to say, guess what? We're in need too. We have to have help. And I'm just not talking about us, but it is a closed society. I will tell you that right now. And having mental health is a key. But mental health needs to be someone who can identify. if someone and it's very well needed, but if someone says, oh, I understand, and if they've never been in a fire, if they've never been in a critical situation, they don't. And I'll give you the background. When I started, we loved the work. In my time, I broke my back twice, falling through floors. I have had collapses. I've had to bail out of a second story window because that was the only way to live, and bouncing against houses. And we put duct tape on my back, keep me going. You brought up an interesting situation too. When you put the gear together, and I forgot to bring this up, the gear that we wear, the turnout is roughly $3,000. You put an air pack on our back, that's $15,000. You put the tools that we have on, you take a 170-pound person, they weigh 315 pounds. And that's before we've even gone to work. So it's not only physical fitness, but it's also mental fitness. So to your point, you have to go back to your core value. Is what are we here for? If you're here for the money, if you're here for the prestige, no, you're not here for the right thing. Your core values have got to say, in a time that someone calls me, if time of a catastrophic situation to someone, we're here to help you. Now, we're not perfect, but I'm going to say it's the greatest profession in the world. It is, I've worked in the private sector. I've been in hospital administration at part-time. This is the greatest job in the world because you're able to take, and what I love about it, it's called chaos. And the nomenclature is chaos means the chief has arrived on the scene, which is kind of a joke. But, people call us in their worst time of need. We have to come in and be calm. We have to come in and reassure them, and we have to show action that our results, they're not always positive. They are not always positive. But that's where training, that's where transparency comes. Seeing what we do, seeing why we do it. And as I said, as I see, and I've talked to Cass many times, the United States for fire and EMS are blessed, in the larger communities. But in places that really need it's virgin. We need to take what we've learned in the United States. We need to take what Europe has learned. We need to bring it together. And I have to for my daughter, who's a 2002 Air Force Academy grad, she's now a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. She was over in Qatar, running Qatar for 9 months a while ago. She's gone into the medical field, and she works with not so fun situations. And sitting and talking to her, from what she came up with me, because she would go on fires, because I started as a volunteer at times. She would go in our personal vehicle with me. I'd get her out of bed. She'd be watching from the front window what happened of the car. So we need to instill it at the basics at the beginning. But to your point, we have to have trust. We have to have security. But we also have to have fear. And that's what we have to deal with. McDonald's will not insure any of their establishments because it's cheaper if there's a fire to let it burn down, and rebuild it. And they're all about dollars and cents. We're all about people. There is a difference there.
And they're looking at the cost of the building. They're not looking at the cost of lives.
Exactly. And unfortunately, I've been in situations where I've had to deal with people not educated, I guess. And they're all worried about just money. We're worried about more life, what it comes down to. In a fire service, typically about 70 to 75, sometimes 80% of our calls are EMS. And as we've talked about, as we all are maturing, we're baby boomers, we're living longer, which is wonderful. But people aren't necessarily taking care of themselves, and that's what we're here for. One of the biggest things that transparencies, as far as now we're working with mobile integrated healthcare, where fire departments work with hospitals when they have patients that have come out of the hospital. That, you know, insurance is what you in and out as quick as possible. I know one insurance company, which will rename, if a woman's going to have a baby, you have 4 hours to be in the hospital. That's it. You're out. So you go in for lunch, have a baby, you and your baby are home by dinner. Well, what's happening is now they are tag teaming with fire departments and paramedics to call it mobile intensive care units, or just vehicles with trained paramedics. We go out to the house. We do what a lot of visiting nurses do, but at a much more economical rate, because we're here 24 hours a day. We're there in the middle of the night at that 3 o'clock phone call, or we're there in the afternoon. We go out and assess the patient and work with the hospital to find out just what is happening with the patient outside the hospital. In Illinois, we're one of 25, I can say mobile stroke units. Central DuPage Hospital has a mobile stroke unit that we actually, it's about $1 million unit. They have trained paramedics, they have nurses, they have what's called telephysicians, and they actually have a mobile CAT scan and MRI unit that comes out to the scene and are able to deliver life-saving medications that we don't have on the scene. It's saving lives.
Wow.
But
Wow, that is such a lot of information and such a lot of context for everybody to absorb. And Chief, we can keep talking for hours and we will barely scratch the surface. Can you believe we've been here for an hour now?
Actually, I can't. I really can't. Well, I've got my glasses off, so I can't see the time.
But I really want to thank you for taking this time, spending the time with the community to educate us, to have this important conversation, and truly help everybody understand the importance of trust, the commitment to public safety, having values that are rooted in purposefully serving, right? And balancing human life and human safety with money, and showing up with that responsibility to serve the public good. And that is a perspective most people don't think of, and everybody thinks in terms of money until it's their life and the lives of their loved ones. So you have given us so much food for thought. Monique, I'm going to give you just 1 minute. Go ahead. We have 2 minutes before we wrap up. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I really appreciated more the work that you do. My question is this: I lead a pretty safe life, so I'm trying to see how I can channel some of the fears that you have experienced in your line of work, and how has that influenced you in leading a more purposeful life?
The best thing to do is, obviously, I don't know where you live at, but to go to your local community and have the fire department, have the EMS come out and show you what's called a home inspection, how best you can protect yourself before they arrive. One of the biggest things, and we're having right now with Thanksgiving, is kitchen fire. And when you have grease, you don't put water into it. You have to have baking soda or an ABC fire extinguisher close to. But I think the best way to do is get familiar with your local area. Go out, see what they do. Because we're going to come in your house. We're probably the only strangers that come into your house. Get to know them. Find out what they do. Show them. We started an adult fire academy to show the residents just what fire's like. That's what I would suggest, to get engaged with your community.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that wonderful question, Monique. And love your answer. And Malik is joining us from Belize. So Belize doesn't have some of the bells and whistles that we take for granted, Mike. So part of what we may want to do is figure out how we can do a collaborative education program to bring some of the wealth of knowledge and experience we have in the US and bring it to developing countries like Belize and the neighboring Caribbean. So something for us to think about as we bring this wonderful, wonderful conversation to a close. And what I really want to do is take a moment and thank you, first of all, for being here, giving us your time, giving us your insight, and educating us so that we can show up as informed public to partner with the public safety professionals and support our communities in a meaningful way so that we are able to be a part of the solution. We are not part of the problem. We are truly part of the solution because public safety is everybody's responsibility.
Exactly. And Cass, and thank you very much. And thank you for the audience, but I have to give you credit. With going through your class, you brought to me the final aspect of financing, how important it is, but also how it integrates into human life. And so that's what I took away from your class. And I was lucky you gave me an A. You felt sorry for this kid from Iowa, but it worked out.
It worked out great, and I continue to collaborate with you. I continue to learn from you. We continue to support each other. And that is what the community is about. So thank you so very much. And thank you to the audience. Thank you to our audience for being a part of this important conversation. And, as we talk today, go out there and start building relationships, getting to know people, building those bridges, because we have to invest in building a community that has integrity, that can trust each other, that shows up for each other. And it is only when we do that, we can be there for each other during a crisis. If we don't have that foundation laid, we're not going to be able to be there for each other in crisis. So please, let's take this opportunity, take the wisdom shared by Chief Spade. Let's go and build a community that befits us. And let's make sure we're transforming everything and everybody around us. And we have to start with ourselves. So go out there and transform lives, transform yourself, and build something that is worthy of each of us.